Good evening, everyone. My name is Mike Hegwood. I'm the Assistant Vice President of Brokerage Marketing for AMA Insurance. And on behalf of our agency, I'd like to welcome you to this evening's webinar on medical malpractice insurance. Our topic this evening is important considerations when renewing your coverage. Steph, could you advance to the next slide, please? Joining me this evening, we have a couple different individuals who are very experienced in medical malpractice insurance. Robin Trenchard, Chris Albano, and Phil Sarazinski. Each of these individuals are affiliated with AMA Insurance. Collectively, they have about 60 years of experience in this marketplace, obviously specializing in this line of insurance, and they work with physicians and practices all across the country. Right now, Phil's having some technical difficulties joining us, but he should be on hopefully very soon. Steph, could you go to the next slide, please? Oh, there's Phil. Hi, Phil. How are you?
Good to be here. Thanks.
A quick disclaimer I always like to start with before we begin these types of webinars. First off, I think it's important that everyone on this session understand that we do offer medical professional liability insurance. We have a lot of different plans from a lot of different carriers. We do earn a commission from the sale of these products, but I think it's important to know that the three individuals that will be joining us this evening all operate on a non-commission basis, and that's very important to us. We want to make sure that any bias is removed from the interaction that they have with our physicians so they can be in the best spot to help you select the coverage that obviously works best for you without any bias. So again, I always think it's important to go through that quick disclaimer. Steph, if you could go to the next slide, please. In terms of the topics tonight, we're going to touch on just some basics just to level set for our conversation, and then we'll spend the lion's share of the time discussing important consideration and common mistakes. And Chris, Robin, and Phil will be sharing some of their insights on those particular items. We'll open it up at the end for Q&A. I would also like to point out that there is a chat function, and so if you do have questions along the way while you're thinking of them, please submit them through the chat. I'll try to field a few of those along the way, but I will commit to the group that we will stay on and answer as many questions as are surfaced. And so we'll certainly make sure we get through all of those. So please submit them as they pop up. Okay, just to level set, what is medical professional liability? Most everybody on this call obviously is very familiar with this product, but just in terms of a definition, so we're all kind of operating from the same point of view, according to Copilot from about 3 or 4 weeks ago, medical professional liability, which is also known as medical malpractice insurance, protects healthcare providers against legal claims and financial repercussions arising from malpractice allegations. Steph, on the next slide, please. I just want to point out a couple other items. First off, what does it cover? It covers legal defense, settlements, judgments, medical damages. What types of coverage is typically available? You're going to hear a lot about claims made or occurrence policies. You'll also hear a little bit about tail coverage. Cost is a big item. Tends to vary by specialty, geography, and any kind of claims history an individual might have. And then the other item, requirements. It is mandated in seven different states, but typically hospitals will require it for attending privileges. So what we find is most every physician has this particular type of coverage. Okay, that's the level set. Get that out of the way. On to the next slide. This is relatively new, and I don't know if many of you follow this or not, but the AMA does research annually on medical liability insurance premiums to kind of track that year over year. And I thought this was an important takeaway, especially as you consider your renewal this year. Premiums increased for the 7th consecutive year. And according to the research, those kinds of increases, we've not really seen that in the market since the early 2000s. So this is relatively new ground for a lot of us here in recent years. And so I think it's an important takeaway. We'll touch on that and some of the important considerations. But it's interesting that with lawsuits at historic lows, the risk still remains and the premiums continue to increase, with many people saying there's no relief in sight in the immediate future. So an important piece that we'll touch on through the balance of this conversation, but I wanted to share that with you. If you haven't seen it, I'd encourage you to go out and take a look at the AMA research on the increasing premiums. Steph, on to the next slide, please. Okay, here's where we're going to dive in. We're going to start talking about some of the key considerations as you approach renewal season this year for your coverage. And Chris, I'm going to start with you. Okay, so first question: when should a physician start to think about their renewal?
Hello, everybody. It's really wonderful to have everybody here, and thank you for coming. My advice would be to start shopping for your renewal 3 to 4 months prior to the renewal date. So if it's July 1st, I would get a jump start between March 1st and April 1st. The more time that we are given, then the more quotes and more options we could give you. We could look through your coverage to make sure everything is in place and good. If we think that the coverage that you currently have is worth keeping, but we're just able to give a much better overall analysis of the coverage and what would be the best situation. I would say 3 to 4 months, and a lot of that is because the carriers have a large volume of applications and such in that delays it. It's not always a quick turnaround, and they come back with questions, and we have to get them from you. So it's not always quick 1, 2, 3. So usually 3 to 4 months, and then you have plenty of time to make an informed decision.
Okay, thank you, Chris. I think that's an important key piece as to when you start. Now, Robin, I'm going to ask the next question to you. Okay, so Chris is saying 3 to 4 months in advance to start the process. Can you give our physicians a feel for what would be needed? What are they going to need to bring to the table to begin that?
Sure. Thank you, Mike. Welcome, everybody. Touching on what Chris said, 3 to 4 months is a good window of time within which to start the process. We're going to need your effective date, most likely a copy of your current policy, or at least just the deck page, which is usually right in the beginning of your policy if you're sort of searching for it through there. We may require an application depending upon what the risk is that we're looking at. Most carriers will want an updated application. We can use something from previously as a jumping off point, but most likely we're going to need a new application. It'll give us a broader perspective on what we're looking for in terms of your risk.
Thank you, Robin. So I think I know the answer to this question, but if I'm sort of beginning the process and I provide you with an application, is there going to be then a series of back and forth? Can you begin the process with one of our carrier partners if you just have the application, or do you need really all of it at once?
Well, it would be helpful to have at least your deck page or current COI. It'll give us the perspective on what your current limits are, if there's a retro date involved, effective date. So that would be helpful.
So the more the better. That's what
The more the better.
the takeaways. Okay, good. Thank you for that. Phil, let me go to you then on this next one. You know, from your experience, you've been working with a lot of different physicians all across the country. What are some key questions that you would encourage them to ask as part of the renewal process? And a follow-up to that, should those questions be directed to a particular person? Should it be the broker? Should it be the carrier? Who would they be directing those questions to?
Yeah, in all honesty, those questions should begin with yourself as a doctor saying, am I really okay? We talk to doctors all the time that have had the same coverage in place for 5, 6, even more years. And they remember back to when they were looking and they felt good about the fact that they were set. But the reality is, as much as we would love to be set, are we set? Has anything changed over the last several months in my practice where it could be detrimental if I don't tell the current carrier or the new carrier about something that's added? You don't want any conflict later on or arguments about what was really covered and what wasn't. Secondly, don't sell yourself short. What if you did cut down on some hours? You know, there are certain watermarks, and it's not always a one size fits all with these carriers about where part-time starts and full-time starts. That's relevant. Questions about asking the broker, for example, who's going to be ideally your shopper. You're more than welcome. You can run some of these questions by your current broker or carrier, but my experience has been that it's the real proactive doctors are asking, does this make sense what I have right now? And that can change, you know, in a year or two, which is why we always say that we are here to run a diagnostic, so to speak, sort of look at what you have. And you have to remember that the AMA, it is different, you know, because we are the biggest advocate of doctors, not just the United States, the world. That's good for you that the pressure is on this place to live to a higher standard where we are not just fighting for business like these other places out there. So when you come to me and you're asking, does this make sense and can I get something better? Well, there's one way to find out. And that's why, as Robin was saying, get that application, we get your CV, proof of coverage. And ideally, if you're in a situation where you're thinking, you know, this seems a bit expensive, well, by golly, tell us what you're paying right now. And whatever you do, uh, I'll tell you who you shouldn't ask is your peers. I'm being funny about that. I mean, you can ask to a certain degree, but we run into situations where a doctor will call and say, you know, I asked my fellow surgeons and I'm paying more than everybody else. Well, did you come to the, I mean, you might not realize that they're in a different part of the process. Maybe they haven't had their policy in place for it. Maybe they're doing different procedures. All these different things. There's no such thing as a wrong question or too many questions. The problem is that people don't ask enough. And the reason very often I find is that it's just one less headache. They just don't even want to think about it. It's almost like going to the dentist or something. They just don't want to have time for it. But the reality is we do the work for you. The only sort of heavy lifting you have to do, and it's not much, is just having yourself or whoever's at the, you know, your manager, whoever, to get us your information. Let us do that shopping with you. And there will be questions that come back from underwriters, and that's a good thing because we want to make sure that the coverage fits exactly, not what you have had. That's neither here nor there. What do you need now? And then secondly, it's got to be with the company, obviously, that's financially strong. Because we are run by doctors for doctors, that is an absolute must. And of course, at the end of the day, a price that's not going to break the bank. And the last thing I'll say, because there might be some people on this call that don't fit the scenario we're talking about. If you're going to be starting a new venture, which we get a lot of calls on, you don't know what you don't know. So there's a ton of questions that you should be asking. And very often we'll tell you what questions, you know, you should be considering. Because for a new venture, it is a different situation. And who better to ask than the AMA before venturing out on your own for the first time?
It's good insight. You know, takeaway, questions are good. And I like the comment about start with yourself. Ask yourself some questions to begin the process. I think that's pretty good. Speaking of questions, I've got two that hit the chat function that I thought were pretty timely. Robin, I'm going to throw this first one back to you. The first question was, how many years of loss runs are needed as I think about gathering all the stuff I need for this process?
Typically, most carriers will ask for 5 years. Some will request 10. You can always run an NPBD report, which is a self-inquiry. It's helpful for us if we can see anything that's on that report. And then if there is, we can dig a little deeper, ask for some more information regarding any claims that are there, and supply a claim supplement, which most carriers will ask for.
Okay, thank you. And Chris, I'm going to throw the next one to you. The second question, and we touched on it maybe just a little at the very beginning, but is AMA a wholesale brokerage operation?
No, we operate independently with access to a number of reputable carriers across the country to serve all types of physicians in different types of roles, and whether it's medical director, you need standalone tail coverage. You say a traditional policy in a traditional practice. We're able to get all of those, but we don't operate as a wholesale brokerage.
Yeah, I'll add to that. I would separate those two words. We're not really a wholesaler. We do work with physicians directly, but we do operate off of a brokerage platform. To Chris's point, we have access to 30 carriers and all types of insurance plans all across the country. So yeah, we do have quite a bit there. Okay, so let's get back on the fourth bullet here. And Chris, I'm going to throw this one back to you. You know, we've talked a little bit already about price. Phil mentioned it. I think Robin mentioned it also. But price aside for just the time being, what key features would you suggest that a physician look for as they, you know, begin and go through this renewal process? Are there some things that you would encourage them to always have? Are there key things they should look for? What's your advice to them as they think about features?
Yeah, I could talk about this for the rest of the webinar, I feel like. So the first thing, most important, you want to make sure that your limits are adequate. Limits will vary by specialty and by state. Some states have a minimum requirement. In other states is a minimum requirement to be in hospitals. So it's really going to depend on where you're working. But I think that the 1 million, 3 million limit is a good start. I think that especially doctors who are doing surgery and invasive procedures would be using 1 million, 3 million just as a starting point, and possibly go higher, just because some of the counties and states that they're in are so litigious. Even if the doctors do everything correctly and the standard of care is good, they could still get brought into a suit and they didn't do anything. Yeah, so you want to always make sure your limits are adequate. So 1 million, 3 million is a good starting point. Another thing that's really important is seeing if there's a consent to settle clause. The AMA only works with carriers that will need to obtain the physician's consent to settle a claim before they go and do that. So you have control over it. The carrier is not able to just go and settle a claim if they want to do that. Some carriers do that. They offer a discount, and it could knock some money off of the price. But I always tell the physician, if I was in that position, I would rather have control over the claim and what happens than taking a discount. But that's just me. You want to make sure that your defense costs are outside the limits. A lot of the carriers will try to put them inside the 1 million, 3 million limits that you're given. So if you are brought into a claim, that 1 million, 3 million limits start to get eaten right away as soon as the defense fees start to pile up. So an important thing that gets overlooked a lot is seeing if the defense costs are inside or outside the limits. You want to see if there is good risk management and claims support at the carriers, because in the event of a crisis, you want to have the best service and the best people there to help you. So we work with carriers who have outstanding claim service, and I always say it's better to be safe than sorry. And to have a carrier who has a dedicated claims team that's proven, that uses attorneys that specialize in the medical malpractice space is really important. Local attorneys. So that's another thing to ask. It's important. And I think another thing I would touch on is the financial reputation, whether they're rated by AM Best or they have regulations through the State Department of Financial Service. You want to make sure that the carrier has at least one of those. You wouldn't want to go with an RRG that is not rated and is not regulated by the State Department of Insurance, because there's no guarantee fund and there's no rating. So, you have that blanket of safety with the Department of Financial Service and the guarantee fund, also with a good rating through AM Best. That would show financial stability, so they would be able to pay a claim. So those are some things that come to mind immediately when you talk about product features. And then the last one would be tail coverage. Most important thing when you cancel the policy. What would the tail look like? You might inquire about what the cost would look like, because it is more expensive when you buy the tail than the annual premium. So that's just something you might want to inquire about, just so you're able to plan for it, because it can get on the costly side, especially when you're getting into the surgical specialties and OB/GYNs and specialties like that.
Okay. Thank you. There's a follow-up question. You just commented on the legal defense, and the question is, did you say it's important that attorneys are local to the jurisdiction of the claim?
I think it's helpful just because they are familiar with the venues and they have a lot of experience there. So a lot of the carriers do have local attorneys, and that's only helpful in the event of a claim, that they are familiar with the venues that they worked in. They worked similar claims before, so it is something that is I would say it's good.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay, Robin, I'm going to go to this last bullet and ask for your perspective and your opinions. Obviously, price is always an important consideration when purchasing this type of coverage. Chris just alluded to some key features he would encourage physicians to explore, consider. But as it pertains to price, could you share with us, from your perspective, what are the key drivers of price, number one? And then number two, is there anything that the physician could be doing to help basically address that particular issue on the price? Is there anything they can be doing to help themselves, so to speak?
Certainly. While geography and specialty are huge. You know, price considerations. You know, specialties certainly can drive the price up, but even Phil touched on it a little bit ago that, you know, it's important to know if you're practicing full time, if you're practicing part time. Those drive price. I mean, if you're practicing part time, your pricing, there's discounts that are associated with that. If you know your loss history is big on pricing, you know, that could, if you're claims free, carriers can offer a loss free discount. In terms of trying to, what they can do to keep that pricing down is really stay on top of what you're doing in your practice. If anything changes, as Phil said earlier, if anything changes in your practice, it'll affect the price. It'll either increase it or it could decrease it based on, you know, if you're adding procedures to your practice that you haven't had in the past, or you're taking things away. Those things are definite price drivers and can change the pricing.
Yeah, and I'll go back to Phil's comment about ask the questions, and then
Exactly.
you can probably dig deeper into the price and understanding, you know, what is adding to it or taking away. So thank you for that. Steph, could you go to the next slide, please? In the spirit of time, I want to just touch on a few of these things, and then we'll open it up to Q&A. But first off, I want to bounce around here a little bit, but I'm going to go to the second bullet point first. Chris, could you comment quickly on the that issue around not asking about the tail provision? I've often heard that that's especially important for those that are approaching retirement, but from your perspective, why can that be a mistake that you see a lot?
Well, one thing that's important, if you're part of a group, you are leaving the group, and then you might have to purchase the tail yourself. So if I'm joining a practice and negotiating with the practice the terms of the contract, something I would put in there is what's going to happen with the tail when I leave, because the tail is, like I said, very costly. And we get calls a lot of the time that a physician is leaving a job and they didn't realize that the tail was going to be this much, or they had to pay, and it's like they get blindsided by it. As far as the retirement question goes, every carrier is different. Many of the carriers we work with do a free tail provision at retirement, where they have to be with a carrier sometimes as little as 2 years consecutively, up to 5, and fully retired at the age of like 50 or 55 years old. And as long as they stay retired, then they'll qualify for free tail coverage. But it's important to make sure that that provision is in the policy. Most admitted carriers and RRGs do it, but it's definitely something worth asking when you're purchasing a policy.
Okay, and also follows into Phil's comment earlier, ask the question. So definitely want to ask about tail and how it fits in. So thank you for that. Phil, speaking of you, would you mind commenting on this concept of starting too late and how that can turn into a real problem for physicians trying to renew their coverage?
Certainly. So there's a host of problems that can occur if somebody just waits a little too long. We get calls on a regular basis from either a manager or a doctor who's saying, oh my God, this really snuck up on us. You know, we need to renew by Monday or something like that. Now, the good news for some people when they do start really late is that there's a grace period very often. But what happens is that it's just, think about your practice. I mean, when you're under duress or you know other doctors that they have an overbooked schedule, it's, I mean, just think about the undue stress you create for either yourself or even your office, because before you know it, unfortunately, it's just not a one size fits all. And what I mean by that is when we are in pursuit of the best possible option for you, believe me when I tell you, as Mike said, we try to cast a very wide net out there and get as much feedback as we can, as quick as we can. But to Chris's point before and Robin's about, I mean, starting a good 2 or 3 months in advance, it gives you a real head start, and it also gives your shopper, so to speak, a head start communicating with these other places, because there will be a time that somebody says, I need a carrier loss run from you, not just a data bank report, those are helpful, but God help you if some carrier is saying, sorry, we have a 7-day wait on those and your grace period runs out in 5 days. Does that mean you're not going to have coverage? Not always, not necessarily, but you might not end up with the best option you could have had. And the other thing to consider is from a credentialing standpoint. We are very often trying to help doctors get their certificate of insurance in the 11th hour. And the reason why it's the 11th hour is because they waited until the 10th hour, so to speak, right? So all these, they have, it's a domino effect. And that's what I mean when I say it's just not a one size fits all. Nobody's trying to scare anybody to taking action, but, a lot of the doctors that call us, like New Ventures, et cetera, they wanted to have one less worry on their mind about, what's coming up over the hill. And the last thing I wanted to point out, just circling back to the thing about cost, keep in mind that there are some carriers that do have a risk rewards program where you can actually save. And by the same token, with loss discounts, don't just assume because you're getting all these nice bells and whistles that it's the best thing in town. It's incumbent upon you to depend on us to say, well, you know what, despite the fact that you're getting these savings, we have 2 other carriers that fit your situation. And the other thing about the, again, the tail, and for those of you younger people on the call who may not have been listening when we talked about retirement because it's so far off, keep in mind, again, to Chris's point, you're not going to switch when you're 60 years old and you've already planned on moving to Florida 2 years later. You don't want to put yourself in a situation with a company that says, no, you actually don't get free tail upon retirement, 55 or older, and you've been with us for 5 years or more. So that's 2 things to keep in mind before you, again, you just have to ask yourself, what are my circumstances and what makes sense right now?
Thank you. Good insight. Robin, I'm going to throw the last 2 bullets to you. They kind of go hand in hand, but when we think about settling because there's too much work or not shopping around, from your experience, why is that such a big, or why can that be such a big problem for physicians?
So this is basically an extension of what Phil was just saying. Settling, it's easy to do. You get your renewal documents in, you take a look, the pricing could be flat from last year. Maybe it's a slight increase. It's a lot of work. I don't want to have to go through that. Let me just sign the documents and move on. I can check that box. It's all done. Allowing us to do that shopping for you doesn't cost you anything, but maybe a little bit of time. If you've got your documentation, a current policy, a current deck page, a certificate of insurance, there are times when we can take just that information and run with it. So for us to go out to our carrier partners and see what we can do and do that shopping for you, we're doing all the legwork. So I think it's beneficial not to settle, to allow us to go ahead and do that. It doesn't cost you anything, but a little bit of time. And then it'll give you a perspective on maybe what else is out there. We've got so many years of experience between the 4 of us. We've been around the block. We know which policies fit which specialties, which geography, which carriers to go to. It's a huge benefit.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. In fact, my takeaway from what you just said is if you at least put in a little time and effort to shop the coverage, you're going to get 1 of 2 things. You're going to get presented with some alternative options that might be a less expensive pathway for you. Or secondly, you'll at least know what you currently have is really good and to keep it. So it's a great point. I think there's clearly some value in there and taking the time to do that. Okay.
I also think, to Chris's point, the different carriers out there, you really need to know what you've got. So although you may have a policy in place right now that's for X number of dollars, and we come back perhaps maybe a little bit higher, the policy that we could be presenting to you could be better than what you've got. And that's huge. I mean, you want to make sure that you've got in place the best possible coverage. It could cost a little bit more.
Yeah, no, great points. Steph, could you go to the last slide? I want to begin to open it up to questions in the spirit of time. We've got maybe a couple minutes over, but I want to make sure we take the time to answer any questions that you all might have. I also want to point out that Chris, Robin, and Phil's contact information is here. So if you feel more comfortable reaching out to them direct and asking them a question or having a conversation with them, I want to make that available, and we'll keep that screen up for the time being. I do see a couple questions. Let me see, pop open the first one here. Can you give a quick overview of the difference between claims and occurrence coverage, and specifically how tail applies to each? Anybody want to take that one?
I could take that one. Yeah, it's a basic but very important question. Claims made will start out relatively cheaper than occurrence policy, and it will increase in price to the mature stage, where it will level out then, as long as there are no claims or anything like that. Now, it comes in when you cancel the policy. In order to have coverage for when that policy was active, you need to have a tail. As opposed to occurrence, where you're going to have coverage without a tail. The tail is essentially built into the policy. I always say it'll go by the occurrence date. So if you cancel the policy May 14th, 2026, and you have an occurrence policy, the claim comes in 2 years from the time that you had the occurrence policy, it's automatically covered. With the claims made policy, in order to have coverage, you would have had to have purchased a tail at the time of the canceled policy.
So, Chris, is it fair to say then the difference between the two is really about how they cover a claim at the time a claim is filed?
There's a couple of differences. I would say cost-wise, claims made is a lot more inexpensive on the front end, but then you pay for it on the back end with the tail, where with occurrence, you're getting a steady rate that's much higher on the front end, but very comparable at the mature stage, and then you do not have to buy a tail. So overall, I think it's less money with occurrence when you go big picture, but front end, you're definitely going to save on claims made. As far as the claims reporting, you're going to go by the claims made date. So if the policy's canceled and you make the claim after the cancel date, you need the tail to have that policy in force, because if it's not in force, the policy, it's no good, and you wouldn't be able to make the claim. Where with the occurrence, you'll go by the occurrence date. So as long as you had an active policy, the date of the occurrence, then you would be covered.
Okay. So even if the coverage is no longer in place,
That is correct.
when it was. Okay, gotcha. Phil, you had a comment to add?
I just wanted to add what Chris laid out there perfectly, I might add. I think that one thing that would benefit everybody in this call, if when you are out there and you are considering both claims made versus occurrence, one of the things that is very beneficial that we can help you with is to provide step-ups. And what that means is, you know, with claims made, as Chris pointed out, you're starting at the first year rate. So people will often say, well, how much is it going to be when it's mature? And that's where the rubber really hits the road as far as what's better, this occurrence policy price that I'm looking at right now, or what's this claims made thing going to look like in 5 years? And you might find out very well that, wow, this is still a considerably good savings on the claims made side, or vice versa. And the other last thing that's worth mentioning, we often get calls from a doctor that will say, I'd rather just have the tail built in and not have to worry about paying tail later. What I often tell doctors is that you have to be trying pretty hard to put yourself in a position to buy tail down the line if you do intend to keep practicing until you're 55 or older and you're going to retire. So that's something to also keep. But again, it's no kidding around. You know, tail is, you know, it's going to be at least 1.5 times what you're paying at the time that needs to be paid for. And those again are unique situations very often with employers and everything else. And as Chris mentioned, you better be very clear when you entertain any employee contract about what the real provision is regarding tail before you leave.
Thank you. Good insight. Robin, let me ask you one last question about this topic of occurrence versus claims. In your experience, what do you see out in the market from state to state? Does it vary by state as to which of the two types of coverages is more popular or more available, or are both found all over the United States?
I mean, Chris may have a little bit more experience with it. Generally, what I've done over my years of being in the med mal industry is claims made. Most of the time, that's what I see. I don't know if all carriers always offer. Chris may or Phil may be able to answer this, but I think that I don't know if all carriers offer both occurrence and claims made. I know that there are some that don't.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that occurrence is very popular in the northeastern United States, like New England and New York. And then when you get into New Mexico, it's predominantly occurrence, but the rest of the country is really claims made. Their occurrence is available in a handful of states, but it's mostly claims made outside of the Northeast and New Mexico.
Okay. Yeah, good to know, because I think you hear these terms and you think you can go find these different things. It might be easier to find in some markets versus others. So I think that's an important consideration as well.
And if I can
Yeah, go
add,
ahead.
a lot of carriers won't even offer occurrence to physicians. So in certain markets, so you can't even get them in certain venues in certain states.
I don't see any other questions right now. So let me pose one back to the group. You know, we've talked a lot about, you know, important considerations. We talked about some common mistakes that you all have seen in your time working with physicians for this type of coverage. If you were to give someone, you know, 3 pieces of advice, they're getting ready to approach their renewal, and they've come to you and said, you know, gosh, Phil, Rob, and Chris, can you kind of simplify this for me? What are the 3 key things that I need to do to make sure I navigate this renewal the right way? Any opinions on how you would frame that for our audience?
I think timing is the biggest issue.
Okay.
To Chris and Phil's point, you need to get out in front of it. Otherwise, we're behind it at the 11th hour, as Phil was saying earlier. I think timing it's huge to get out in front of it, to present all of the options, and it allows the physician to make an informed decision.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say educate yourself. Don't jump at the first one that comes, because there are a lot of options out there. There's a lot of really good carriers in the market, and some are more competitively priced than others, depending where you are. So I wouldn't just jump at the first one. I think that it's important to educate yourself, ask questions. You don't think that a question is stupid. The only stupid questions are the ones you don't ask. It's important to know, because if you are brought into a lawsuit, then then there's a lot at stake. So you want to make sure that you're comfortable with the carrier. You want to make sure they have a good reputation with claims. You want to make sure you have a lot of good limits. You want to make sure everything that you're doing is included in the policy, that there's no exclusions. There's a lot of minutia in this to go through. But I really think that just if any questions come up, just that's what we're here for. I would just ask them, and we're here to go through it with you. You know, it's like the doctor. I'm sure when I go, I ask some questions that I feel like are probably silly, but you guys are the experts, and that's why we go to you, and that's how you have to look at us. We're the insurance people.
Good point. There's one other question that popped up. I want to make sure we get to that. The question is this: what is the additional coverage that you will ask for a physician that is also a medical director in an outpatient center on family medicine? Anybody want to take that one? Let me read it one more time. What is the additional coverage that you will ask for a physician that is also a medical director in an outpatient center on family medicine? Phil, you want to take that one?
I was just going to say, we get a lot of calls on this when somebody's about to become a medical director, and very often it's a doctor. So getting back to what we were saying before about those key informational items we need. Again, some form of we actually have a very straightforward application that we use for medical directors. And when you couple that not only with the doctor's CV, but the description, we always ask for a summary description, a few sentences or whatever it is, to be crystal clear on, will this doctor still be practicing medicine? And if it's a matter of yes, but not very much, then we need to figure out how not very much. Is it, everybody's got a different idea of what's not a lot. I talked to somebody a week ago, it's like only 20 hours, while somebody's 2 hours, right? So, and it's also a question of the type of model that the practice has. Underwriters want to know about what the full spectrum is of this environment, in addition to what that specific new medical director is going to be doing, and then yes, what they're still going to be doing as a doctor. So as much as it would be nice to have a nice and easy answer for you, this is all the more reason why this is not to be treated like Geico or Jared at State Farm. This is very nuanced. We need to figure it out. And if necessary, the underwriters will ask questions that will guide you to a place that you're going to be satisfied with, because you know we've left no stone unturned for you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Phil. I'm looking through the chat. I think we've answered all the questions. So I think we can wrap things up. Phil, Robin, Chris, thank you again for your time and your insight this evening. Very much appreciated. Also appreciate all the physicians out there that joined us this evening, or those that might be listening to this through a recording. We're certainly here to help, but we're mostly here to help educate is one of the things we wanted to try to deliver tonight. So hopefully you got some new information out of this. If nothing else, you have some contacts. If you have some additional questions, feel free to reach out. We are here to help and happy to help. So with that said, thank you again, everyone, for participating, and we will conclude tonight's session.